Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about spirituality today. And as I said a moment ago, please don't tune me out. It's an important conversation, and we're really going to look at our values as opposed to straight up looking at spirituality. Because values and spirituality, I believe, are deeply intertwined. Um, when we enter recovery, whether we're an addict or a betrayed partner, we often have a well-formed spiritual practice, some of us. Others of us, not so much. I came in to recovery. I was either an atheist or an agnostic, depending on the day and my mood. I was not a believer. I was certainly not religious in any way. I had no spiritual practice. I was very disconnected from everything, including any idea of something, a power greater than myself. I had vague memories of, my childhood exposure to religion, which was not great for me. I'll be kind of honest, and I don't want to offend anybody here, but I was raised in a Christian faith, and I can remember being 5, 6, 7 years old and hearing the story of Mary, who was miraculously pregnant, and I was sitting in the audience going, that's not how this works. I'm not exactly sure the specifics, but it sounds to me like maybe she had an affair and doesn't want anybody to know. And that's the way my mind worked right from the start. And again, I don't want to offend anybody. If you have Christian beliefs and they're strong, please, don't be offended by me. I just didn't buy it. Why would a God who loves us flood the planet because we misbehave? It just didn't work for me. So I just shut it all down, including spirituality, and I shut people down as well. And it didn't work very well for me. And when I came into recovery, I was very resistant to the spiritual aspect of 12-step recovery in particular, which we'll talk more about in a minute. But let's back up and let's go to values. So this is the user participation section. So I'm gonna have to reverse my screen real quick. So this won't be backwards. Control background mirror. Okay. So I'm going to show you this, and you should be able to. Oh, good. I want you guys to, if you have a piece of paper somewhere, divide it into 3 columns like this. Now you can see it, and label them important, more important, and most important. So 3 columns. 1 is important, 1 is more important, and 1 is most important. And I'm going to read some values out, and you guys are going to fill in these columns, and then I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So that'll be the user participation part. Everybody ready? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to get a piece of paper and create these columns. And I hope everybody plays along here, because this is kind of fun and interesting. Okay, so I'm going to read off. I've got a list of 16, 17 values here. 18, maybe more. It's about 20. Okay. I didn't count. I'm gonna read off the value, and you're gonna place it in one of these 3 columns, either important, more important, or most important. And please note that these are all important. Most people will agree that these are important values, but some of them are important, some are more important, some are most important. Okay, so the first one is courage. The second one is creativity. Creativity. The third one is faith. Whatever faith means to you, however you want to define it, faith. And I'm not giving you much time because I want you to go with your first instinct. The next one is hard work. Next up is honesty. Okay, the next one is independence. The next one is openness. Openness. Next one is learning. Next one is personal growth. Power. Rewarding relationships, or just relationships. Solitude. Self-examination. Spirituality. Success, whatever success means to you, success. Wealth. And then the last one is empathy. Empathy is the ability to share someone else's feelings or to feel their feelings with them. So empathy is our last one. For those of you who joined us late, that was a list of values. I had everybody create this 3-column chart: important, more important, most important, and we're labeling, we're putting these values that I read off into one of these columns. Where can I get the list of values you read out? I will try and post them on our website tomorrow. If anybody wants that list of values, I'll try and do a short blog quick tomorrow morning, and I'll pop it up for you. Thank you for asking that. And there are plenty more values. I'm going to reverse the screen back because everything looks backwards to me. Just a second. And it makes me crazy. There we go. Now, when I lift my right hand, it's on the right side of my screen, probably on the left side. Anyway, whatever. This works better for me. So we have these values. We have them all in the columns. Now we're going to use the Q&A feature because the chat feature is apparently disabled. So using the Q&A feature, pop in there which of these values you had trouble placing. Which one of them did you have trouble picking a column for? So just pop that into the Q&A for me. Just a second. Well, I'm going to answer this text while you do that. Okay. Oh, awesome. You guys are great. You're participating. I love this. Independence from somebody. Wealth and success. That is often one that people have trouble placing. Empathy. Trouble placing empathy. Interesting. Wealth and independence. Solitude. Interesting. Faith, success, another solitude. Empathy, openness, success, independence, wealth, and solitude. You got a bunch that you struggle with. Looking for compassion. Yeah, that should be on the list. Wealth, success, power, independence, creative, solitude. I love this, that we had some power. Yeah, I love that we had some trouble placing these, because trust me, when I have done this exercise, I have been all over the place, and it looks different every time I do it because it kind of depends on my mood. I'm going to close the Q&A for a second. It kind of depends on my mood, and it kind of depends on where I am in my recovery and how solid my recovery looks. And interestingly, I will find myself sometimes, well, here's the next question I have for you. Do you have shame about where you placed certain values? Like, did you put something in most important, but you feel like society would tell you it should be in just important? So that's my next question, because I often feel shame about where certain things go. Solitude for me is most important. I'm a person who needs my downtime and my alone time. So I want to know which ones you have shame about, and whether you think you placed it too high or too low, if you don't mind adding that into the Q&A. Solitude is one for me. Wealth, I value wealth, but it's interesting. I value it probably lower than most people, or lower than my mother would like. Learning is very high for me. Creativity is very high for me. Um, certain things that seem, like my mother wouldn't approve. So, okay, we got some coming in. Somebody had faith, no shame from somebody. Well, really? I'm impressed, actually. If you were able to be like 100% honest with yourself and get them in the right columns and feel good about it, you are way more well-adjusted than I am. This one, no shame, except for most of them, but solitude and independence. There's some shame there. Independence is very high for me. Some people, it's very low. The person who said faith, they had some shame. And then the explanation is, I placed it too high because I don't have much faith after being betrayed. See, this is what we do. We place it where we think it should be, where nobody's seeing your list of values, and we still judge ourselves for it. Not near as much now that I'm focused on my needs, so not a lot of shame there. Relationship, put this as more important, but feel like it should be most important. But after betrayal and on recovery, it's not as important. So we do feel some shame. One of the things I love about this exercise is we find out what we really believe. We find out what our values really are, especially when I start asking questions like, do you have any shame? Do you feel bad about it? And we often put things in a column because that's where they ought to be, or we think that's where they ought to be, instead of that's where they are. So I'm going to challenge everybody who did this exercise after the session today to go through and re-rank. Do it again, but do it without judging yourself. And if you're an addict, I would ask you to judge how here's where we're going to judge how your addiction aligns with your values. And if you're a betrayed partner, just judge how your life in general aligns with your values, because values are really, really important. It is who we are. And then compare and contrast, your most important values to the lesser important, they're all important. All right. Now I want to talk about spirituality for a second, which I did promise we were going to do. So this is the tricky bit. A lot of people, particularly addicts, but a lot of betrayed partners, it is very hard after discovery, after addiction, after betrayal, to have the kind of faith or spiritual connection in anything that most of us would generally like to have, or maybe feel that we should have. I'm not going to ask you to describe your current situation, but it's popped in here. Betrayal can cause this vacillation, but they resettle back to where I feel they should be. You rebalance well, yes. Betrayal, our mood at any given time can cause vacillation. I don't know if vacillation is a real word, but I think it is. I'm going to pretend it is. Normally when I have like a group of addicts in front of me, that's who I usually do this exercise with. I ask them to describe their concept of God, higher power, and religion, and all that stuff. Is your God comforting? Is your God scary? Or higher power, if we prefer that term. I personally had this vision of God as being about 7 feet tall and, flowing silver hair and a really long silver beard and a white robe and Birkenstocks. And he's really, really judging. And he punishes us when we don't behave the way he thinks we should behave. That was my vision of a higher power, and it just didn't work for me. Judgmental, angry, mean, vindictive, these are not things that I particularly want from a higher power. Just to validate you, vacillating, intransitive verb. Thank you. It is a word. Yay. I love you guys. You guys help me. So I had to, and I came into recovery and I was stuck on step three. Step one is, I got a problem. Step two is I need help. Step three is turning my will and my life over to God as I understand God. And I had a big problem with that. I didn't want to do any God stuff. That was just, no, it made my skin crawl. Some of you are probably experiencing that right now, and that's okay. Because 12-step programs and recovery programs in general, unless you go to a faith-based program, which we are not, it's at Seeking Integrity, all spiritual beliefs are welcome and celebrated, including no spiritual beliefs. It really stuck in my craw, but step three actually reads, came to believe, or turn my will and my life over to the care of God as we understand God. And that those last four words made it palatable for me, as we understand God. But I still had a whole lot of trouble working steps 3, 7, and 11, which are the God steps in 12-step groups. So my sponsor at the time finally said, you know what, skip step 3. We're just going to go to step 4. We're going to work all the other steps. And when we get to step 12, we'll look back and see if we need to rework step 3. As it turns out, I didn't. I had developed a spiritual connection without even trying. But in the beginning, I was trying a lot of things, and there were some exercises along the way that helped me. So that's kind of what we're going to do real quick. All right. So visualize a big circle on a blank sheet of paper. And inside the circle, we're going to write character traits that we would like a higher power to have, whatever that higher power is. It could be a therapist or a friend or a sponsor or a religious figure or whatever, but a higher power, something outside of ourselves that we're going to rely on. So we're going to write character traits inside the circle that we would like that entity to have, and outside the circle, we're going to write the traits we would not like. So I'm going to ask you guys to go back to the Q&A feature again. Let's go with traits first that we do not want in a higher power. And if you're struggling, look at the things on your values list. Things on your values list are probably going to show up inside the circle, and the opposite of the things on your values list are probably going to show up outside the circle. So type into the Q&A feature outside, things we don't want. Judgmental, that is number 1 on my list. Thank you so much for getting that number 1 right out of the gate. Come on, everybody, catch up. I don't want judgmental. I don't want vindictive. There we go. Mean, judgmental. Expectations. I don't want a higher power who has expectations. I don't want an angry higher power. A man, okay, I'll buy that one. Yeah, some people, and I don't blame you. If you've been hurt by men, why would you want a man? So yeah, judgment, expectations, anger, mean, judging, vindictive, unforgiving, yes. Not empathetic. I don't want a God who's not empathetic, or a higher power who's not empathetic. Okay, we're getting the idea here. So more just came in. Too many rules. Yes. Okay. Let's flip the script here. We also have lack of compassion and unforgiving. Let's flip the script here. Let's look at things we want inside the circle. Traits we would like for a higher power. And again, go to your values list. If it's in your most important, you'd probably like that from your higher power too. So and here they come. Loving, yes, I want a loving higher power. Kind, forgiving, empathetic, serene. Oh, serene, I like that. Forgiving. Forgiving is going to be a theme, usually. Helpful, understanding, empathetic. I'll give you one of mine here. I want a God that has a sense of humor. I want a God who likes to surprise me and amuse me. And I want a God who gives me free will, lets me make mistakes, but is there for me to pick me up and dust me off. So, okay, a few more here. Virtuous, yeah, I think that's probably honest, and it has some integrity. Morality, yes, whatever morality means to you, which could be different for you than me or anybody else. Kind, empathetic, balanced, focused, hopeful, empowering, excellent. All these great traits are inside the circle now. So when I do this exercise with the guys in person, I'm going to close the Q&A for a second. And by the way, if you have questions for today about anything to do with addiction and recovery, start typing them in now. But when we do this exercise in person or even on Zoom, I have the guys take some scissors and cut away all the stuff outside the circle. And then it's either shredded or ritually burned or whatever. It's disposed of in some meaningful way. Like I'm taking all of this stuff out. And then we have this circle with all the words in it. And for me, this was very helpful. I kept that circle. As a matter of fact, I did the next exercise where I'm going to describe in a second. Please type into the Q&A with questions. Everything that was left in the circle, I acted as if that was my higher power. And eventually, by the time I was to step 12, it was my higher power. And it wasn't anything religious. It certainly wasn't, a 7-foot-tall white guy in a robe with Birkenstocks. It was very different and it was very nebulous. And I still can't really define my higher power. But I know my higher power cares about me and has some empathy and has my best interests in mind. My higher power doesn't give me everything that I asked for or everything that I want. My higher power does give me or provide for me or help me provide for myself everything that I need, which is a wonderful distinction. So the last bit that I have sometimes, and I'll let you guys do this at home if you want to, particularly if you're really struggling with your concept of a higher power. I think this is a great exercise. Do a visual of that circle with all of those characteristics and virtues. You can do a collage, cut out magazine images and just paste them in there. Or if you're artistic, you can draw it, or you can write how you feel, do something, or you can do a poem, anything to create something that represents your higher power. And I find that doing the creative exercise portion of this really brings it to life in a way that just words on paper doesn't. We kind of create the higher power we want. And I find that sort of fascinating and interesting. Anyway, that's my 10 cents on values and spirituality. And pop things into the Q&A feature. And we have some questions left over from, I think, whatever the last time we met, because it's been, I think, a couple of weeks since we actually met. So I'm going to pick the leftover questions while we wait for some new ones to come in. And thank you all for bearing with me and talking about spirituality, which is a topic that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So this first question is from a couple of weeks ago. Can you speak more about what accountability looks like in a recovery plan for a sex addict that is single, lives alone, and has recently retired? What level of support is recommended and what would it look like? For me, hey, I am single and I live alone. I'm not retired, clearly, but my accountability is obviously not with a partner because I don't have one right now. It's with friends and my 12-step sponsor. I'm not active in therapy at the moment. I come and go with therapy. I'll go for a while and then I take a year off and then I go for a while whenever I want to work on deeper issues. But you create a support network of fellow recovering addicts and you get a sponsor in a 12-step program. If you have a therapist, you're accountable with your therapist. And maybe you put Net Nanny on. I have Net Nanny on all my devices, which is just an extra layer of security for me. The only thing that somebody who's in a relationship would have is that extra layer of accountability with the partner. So otherwise, it looks the same as any other accountability for any addict. The next one is my husband in the early stages of recovery has been reluctant to stop using marijuana. He has a severe anger problem, and I believe a lot of it is due to the sex addiction and his unhealed childhood trauma. His anger fuels the addiction, and he says the marijuana allows him to calm his anger and relax after work. Can you better explain why the inhibition that marijuana causes in marijuana itself is contraindicated for a sex addict? Okay, so why should he not be smoking dope? There's about 100 reasons. Addiction recovery, addiction impacts the brain, and it particularly impacts the pleasure center of the brain. We produce dopamine. We have neurons that release dopamine, and then we have some other neurons that receive the dopamine, and they kind of have to plug in like a lamp to turn on. We don't feel pleasure until dopamine is released and received. Now, our normal walking around, produce receive level is like 100. An orgasm gives us double that, 200. These are arbitrary numbers assigned by scientists who study this. So, this is the natural reward scale. Just walking around is 100, orgasms 200, depressed is anything below 100. So, eating tasty food brings about 120, hanging out with friends and eating tasty food, maybe 130, 140, we can derive a pretty good chunk of pleasure, which is why we do these things. The reason orgasm is so high on the scale is because we need to have sex to reproduce. Eating is pretty high on the scale sometimes because we need to eat or we'll die. So this is evolution. It's giving us pleasure when we do things that keep us and the species alive. This is great. The crummy thing about addiction is we manipulate the pleasure center. Cigarettes, nicotine, just smoking a cigarette, the dopamine hit is 220. Orgasm is 200. Nicotine is 220. Cocaine, 350. Methamphetamine, stay away from meth, 1300. Don't go try it because it's just bad for you. Cocaine addicts' brains and porn addicts and sex addicts' brains tend to look really similar. So we're thinking porn and sex, they haven't done measurements on this, but comes in about 350, way above an orgasm. We actually get more pleasure as an addict from the anticipation of sexual behavior than we get from sexual behavior. So now here's the nasty bit of addiction is the brain is very adaptable. It heals itself. It recognizes he's been looking at porn for 4 hours a day. My dopamine level's been spinning at 350. That is not natural, normal, or healthy. So the brain turns down the volume. It reduces the number of cells that produce dopamine, and it really reduces the number of cells that receive dopamine. So instead of having this many, we have like this many. We just can't get as much pleasure. This is why addicts escalate. I started out drinking a couple of beers, then it was a 6-pack, then it was a whole case, and then I switched to vodka, and now I'm shooting heroin. This is why addictions escalate, because the brain keeps turning down the volume. Now, the brain will heal, and it will reset to baseline, because what happens is it turns down the volume on everything. So our walking around dopamine is no longer 100, it's like 60. We're walking around depressed, which is why we keep turning to the addiction. We're just trying to get back to 100 eventually. Forget about getting up to 350. We can't. We'd like to get to like 150 or 100 sometimes if the addiction's really severe. The brain will heal over time, and the desire to engage in the addiction drops with that, because we're starting to experience normal pleasure again from things like eating or hanging out with our friends, or having an orgasm with a single partner as opposed to with 400 images and videos going at the same time. So the brain will, the dopamine level will creep back up to 100 for the baseline. If you're still smoking marijuana, the dopamine level is still artificially elevated and the brain's not going to heal. This is the number one reason you shouldn't be smoking dope while you're trying to get sober from another addiction. We don't even let guys smoke cigarettes at our treatment facility because for this very reason. You know, it's not like we're anti-cigarettes, it's that your brain can't heal while you're still active in an addiction. Your brain can't heal from one addiction while you're still using in another. This is the number one reason to not use marijuana while you're recovering from sex addiction. Other reasons, you know, I mean, marijuana is disinhibiting. So things like anger can go, and yeah, people think, you know, a few drinks will mellow me out, but you know, there's that line between a few drinks and then that one sip that goes from mellow to real asshole. And marijuana is the same way. So I would suggest that the marijuana might even be playing into his anger issues, but it's certainly preventing him from healing properly from sex addiction. Next one here, my husband says he does not get triggers, yet he will talk about women's beautiful eyes, hair, etc. Is he just lying or not understanding his own addiction? A little from column A, a little from column B. You know, we are, as human beings, men, women alike, we're, this again, evolution. Evolution wants us to reproduce. It wants us to notice when we find somebody or see somebody attractive. But you know, whether that's a trigger for a sex addict or not a trigger for a sex addict is often difficult to define. You know, I was in a support group this morning and we got onto TV shows where the guys were okay watching certain shows and were not triggered, even though there was some mild visual triggers in the shows, but they weren't triggered. Their wives, however, were very triggered because they thought the husbands were triggered. So this does happen, but sometimes addicts can be like, no, I'm not triggered. Or, you know, it's like, really? You say you never get triggered? Because I find that hard to believe as a recovering sex addict and somebody who works with recovering sex addicts. We get triggered. That's natural. It's normal. You know, it's what we do with the trigger that matters. You know, I can get triggered 100 times a day, but I don't have to act on that trigger. I can still stay sober. I can use the tools of sobriety to not act on the trigger. So I don't know. I think I answered that question. Why are women allowed in 12-step programs with men? I think it would be very triggering. Oh, this is a great question. First of all, not all 12-step meetings are allow both genders. Some 12-step meetings are men only. We call them stag. Some of them are women only. Various names used for that. Because sometimes people don't feel safe in mixed gender rooms. We are a men-only treatment center here in LA. But we have plenty of staff members who are women. Here's the deal. Let's say I'm a straight male sex addict, which I'm not. I'm a gay male sex addict. But let's say I'm straight and I go to 12-step meetings. It can be triggering if there's a female sex addict in the room because she'll be sharing and I'm getting triggered. So maybe I need to go to stag meetings until I can start to handle triggers. But the fact of the matter is there are women everywhere. I mean, am I not going to go to the grocery store? Am I not going to go to the mall? Am I not going to go to the ball game? You know, I have to live my life. So I have to learn how to be in a room or be around people who might visually trigger me. That's why most 12-step meetings are mixed gender. The reason we do single gender treatment is because it's so early in the process that having that kind of trigger around can be too much. Now, I did mention we have plenty of women who work for us. They have very good boundaries, very, very, very good boundaries. And they will call guys out on inappropriate behavior. And this is good because the guys need to learn, oh, women don't actually like to be objectified all the time. So it's a mixed bag. I have worked previously in a treatment center that was mixed gender, and I can tell you that every day I wished it was not mixed gender, because way too many of this was a substance use facility, but nobody was focused on getting sober. They were all focused on, finding a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and it was not productive. In treatment centers dealing with early sobriety, I'm a big fan, and I know Dr. Rob is as well, of one gender only. 12-step meetings, they have a mix, and they have a mix for a reason. Some people need single gender, some people are perfectly fine with mixed gender, and in fact, it helps their recovery. It gives them a chance to be around people who would normally trigger them, but in a setting that's safe. So I hope that clears that question up too. Okay, now on to the questions that came in today. Question, how do I deal with an addict antisocial disorder partner who has forgotten about his acting out over the 23 years with me, as well as most of his acting out from age 15 to meeting me? He's not able to give up his arrogance, even with SAA meetings, wasting time clinging to his union card and ego for dear life. Antisocial disorder is a personality disorder that is very hard to deal with. It's often misdiagnosed as that when it's really not. Same thing for narcissistic personality disorder. Any of the personality disorders, they're very hard to accurately diagnose and equally hard to treat. So how do you deal with an addict? The question seems to be he's forgotten about his acting out over 23 years with you, and then from his mid-teens on. This is kind of a difficult question because there are a lot of things that can play into memory issues, one of which is denial. And it sounds like you feel like he's in denial, and that is the most likely option, but there could also be some legitimate, traumatic brain injury or less obvious brain injuries that impact the memory center. But my experience with addicts is when they say, I don't remember, that's an excuse I used. So I'm speaking from experience. I do remember, but I don't want to tell you. So that's entirely possible. All I can tell you is, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're asking questions. We have some great support for betrayed partners, some free groups. We have an online work group for betrayed partners. That is really the best place to deal with questions like this. You have more time, you can interact with each other. Others can share their experience and what they did. This is not my area of expertise. Antisocial disorder, memory, not my area of expertise. But I do know about denial. And denial is a tough thing, but you can set some boundaries. You need to tell me the truth. We need to do a full therapeutic disclosure. That's where the addict makes a list of everything he can remember to the best of his ability. And, your therapist and his therapist work together. And then in a therapeutic setting with both therapists present, he reads his disclosure to you. This is everything I've done. And then he takes a polygraph. And, if he agrees to take that, if he wants to save his relationship with you, he will agree to do this. He might resist, but he'll eventually agree to do this, and he'll agree to the polygraph because you need the truth and you deserve the truth. So I want to validate you deserve the truth, and it sounds like you're not getting it. So I really feel for you. So hang in there, push for disclosure. Okay, next one. My porn addict lied throughout our whole marriage. I'm so traumatized by his lies. Sometimes I feel the lying was more impactful than the acting out. He still can't get why his lying was so damaging for our relationship. This makes me so angry, and I don't know how to just make peace with him, never understanding. He says everyone in his life has betrayed him, so he just expects people to lie to him. But I gave him my complete, absolute trust, and he lied so much. How can I let this go? First of all, I want to validate. You said, I feel the lying is more impactful than the acting out. Dr. Rob Schrahl's name now and Jennifer Schneider did some research on this. And one of the things they found, they were looking at betrayed partners of sex addicts. One of the things they found was that the secrets and the lies were ultimately more hurtful than the actual behavior. It's the secrets and lies because it calls into question everything that's ever happened in the relationship from day one. Now, when there's a long-standing pattern of lying, yeah, it is incredibly damaging to any relationship. All healthy relationships are built on, first and foremost, mutual trust. If there's no mutual trust, the relationship will suffer, and it will suffer a lot. And the person who's being lied to and having secrets kept from them is going to suffer. Sometimes you can even be gaslit. By the way, Merriam-Webster's word of the year for 2022 is gaslighting. It was the most looked up word in their whole dictionary, gaslighting. So I invite you to look it up. But it's when a cheating partner tells lies and insists that the lies are true over and over and over, to the point where the betrayed partner starts to believe the lies, starts to question her usually own interpretation of reality. So as far as him saying everyone in his life has betrayed him, so he just expects people to lie to him. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't apply to you. I mean, doesn't mean he has to lie too. If he's a porn addict and he's not making progress, we have an online porn addiction work group, which I teach, and then the next one starts December the 12th. Go on to seekingintegrity.com, click the work groups button, scroll down to porn addiction, and sign him up, or make him sign himself up. Because we talk about this. We talk about the impact of lies and secrets, and how damaging that is. We also talk about that in the Doghouse work group. But if he's struggling with sobriety still, do the porn addiction or the sex addiction work group first, and then the Doghouse work group. So yeah. Scott, Eddie C. talked a few weeks ago about mesmerizing. I've heard your story of when the husband used his wife as his addiction. Could you explain mesmerizing and how an addict could use his wife this way? Does it or does it not disconnect the addicted person from the wife? I have not listened to Eddie's webinar on mesmerizing, so I'm going to kind of skip that little bit of this. And I know I need to, because I've heard it's excellent. But you have heard me tell about husbands, basically acting out with their wives. I've had guys tell me I was cheating on my wife with my wife. And what they mean when they say that is they are turning their wife into an object. They're not seeing her as a whole person or as their wife. They're using her as essentially a receptacle. Does it not disconnect the addicted person from the wife? Of course it does. If I'm looking at you and only seeing your breasts or your rear end or whatever it is about you that I got the hots for at that given moment, I'm not seeing you. I'm just seeing body parts, and that is very, very disconnecting for both parties, not just for the addict, but for the betrayed partner, the wife who's being used in that way. And I promise I will listen to Eddie's webinar. I'll watch Eddie's webinar. Can you explain the tools, please? I must, drink of water. Excuse me. Can you explain the tools, please? Tools, I'm assuming this is tools of recovery. There are a lot of tools of recovery. The easiest way for an addict to stay sober is to know what his triggers are, and only some of the triggers are visual. I'm not used to talking this much, obviously. I usually have David here. But most triggers are actually emotion. Their anxiety, their stress, their loneliness, their boredom, their fear. shame, all that stuff, things we don't want to feel. So when I don't want to feel something as an addict, I slide forward into fantasy, and usually sexual fantasy because I'm a sex addict. At this point, I'm actually kind of in my addiction because I'm fantasizing about sex, and it's usually non-intimate, disconnected, objectified sex. So when I catch myself feeling triggered or lapsing into fantasy, and then fantasy turns into steps I'm taking toward acting out, and I act out. And then I feel bad about it, which triggers me again because shame, anxiety, all that stuff. So tools are how we intervene. One of the great, for visual triggers, we have the 3-second rule. We have two versions of the 3-second rule. Dr. Rob's version, which is to humanize the person you're objectifying, and my version, which I'll get to in a second. But Dr. Rob's version is, as soon as I catch myself objectifying, that's 1 second, 2 seconds, turn away. And in the 3rd second, I humanize that person. That's a wife and a mother and somebody's daughter. And, she's here to buy groceries, not to be ogled by me. I humanize the person. Early in recovery for me, I was so disconnected that I couldn't do that. I couldn't humanize somebody. So for me, the 3-second rule is more about I'm objectifying, so I need to turn away and then think about something else in second number 3, anything else. Score last night's game, the car I'd like to buy, what am I going to have for dinner, whatever. Just change my thinking. That's a tool, the 3-second rule. Other tools, my personal favorite tool is a gratitude list. I do a gratitude list when I feel triggered, particularly if I catch myself with an emotional trigger like anxiety or shame, or fear. I'll do a gratitude list, just 10 things I'm grateful for. That'll change my mood really quickly. That's a really good tool. Journaling is a tool. Meditation is a tool. Picking up the phone and calling a fellow recovering addict is a huge tool for all of us. And these tools work for betrayed partners too when you're triggered. Talk to somebody, process these things in a healthy way. But addicts especially, we need tools. We need to be able to reach into our toolkit, pull something out and go, oh yeah, my phone, I can call my sponsor, or I'm stuck in line at the store behind somebody who's visually triggering. I need to, I'm triggered, I'll turn away, I'll think about something else, or I'll humanize that person. So those are the tools. Let me see, follow up. Disclosure was a major dribble. Yeah, that's bad news. Passed the poly, but faked it. This is a follow-up. Yeah, this trickle truth disclosure is a nightmare. My friend Michelle Mays calls it death by paper cut. Okay, next one here. My wife wants me to do a full disclosure, but I don't think the polygraph is 100% truthful. Okay. If you're willing to do a full disclosure and tell her everything, you ought to be willing to take the polygraph. Period. That's my answer to that. Reasonable minds may disagree. You can disagree. You can be mad at me for saying that, but that is my personal belief. If you're willing to do disclosure, be willing to take the polygraph. For a couple of reasons. Number one, it forces you to be 100% truthful. And number two, your wife knows you're telling the truth. Now, your wife may or may not believe, but if you pass the polygraph, and it's kind of hard to argue. But some people will still argue, and that's fine. Yes, the lies, double life is, this is the next question. Yes, the lies and double life is what hurts most. All the sex addicts, not much more than an alcoholic chasing a shot glass. Flushing our life for 23 years down the toilet, job loss, legal, theft, spending, retirement savings, etc. Is what is the biggest betrayal to me. Yeah, it's the lies and secrets about things like money, and where you've been and who you've been with, and living a double life. Yes, triggers. Okay, this is the last one here. I think I am past the anger stage as a betrayed partner. For me, it's now just sadness when the reality of our many years together were, when the reality of what our many years together were. When that hits me, I feel despondent. He's in early recovery, and that feels hopeful for me. Yet at the same time, the weight of it all feels so heavy. I have a CPTT, CSAT. How do I hold on to hope when I don't know if he can or will stay in recovery? I realize this is probably unanswerable. Thank you for all the support you provide. Actually, this is answerable. Yeah, how do you hold on to hope when your partner is in early recovery and you don't know if he's going to stay there and continue to walk the path and become rigorously honest and re-earn trust and et cetera, et cetera. How do you hang on to hope? I mentioned Michelle Mays earlier. She has a blog, and I highly recommend it for betrayed partners. It's called Partner Hope. You can find it at partnerhope.com. She writes about betrayed partners better than anyone, in my opinion, including me. And I do write about betrayed partners once in a while. So you're past the anger stage, good. For me, it's just sadness when the reality of what our life was versus what I thought it was. You're in grief right now. You're grieving the relationship you thought you had. And one of the early stages of grief, anger. And one of the later stages of grief is depression, sadness, depression, despondent. That's the stage you're in right now. You're grieving the life you thought you had and found out you didn't have. You're in a very normal grieving process. Read up on grief. As we work through grief, the final stage is acceptance, and it's acceptance of what is, rather than being despondent about what isn't. I think of grief as going through a big long tunnel. The guys at the Seeking Integrity House, they just heard this from me earlier. Sorry, guys, get a repeat because they're on here tonight. Is going through a big long tunnel, and it's really dark and it's really scary and it looks like it's never going to end. And then you see a little pinpoint of light, and it kind of grows and grows, and then eventually you pop out into the open air and there's bright sunshine, and you realize, oh, the world hasn't ended. The sun still comes out. Good things still happen. It's just a matter of getting there. I told this to the guys earlier when I was teaching at the center. When you're walking through hell, don't stop. Just keep walking. You will get to the other side. So to your question, how do I hold on to hope when I don't know if he can or will stay in recovery? Look for that pinpoint of light and just point toward it. And realize that the recovery process is 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back. And that's going to be true for your partner. It's going to be true for you. You're going to be on an emotional roller coaster. He's going to be on an emotional roller coaster. It's not the same roller coaster. Once in a while, you'll both be up or down at the same time, but most of the time you're not in the same place. If you want to hold on to hope, get a support network around you of other betrayed partners who are going through this, or close friends and family who support your decision to stay in the relationship, because it's clear you've made that decision, provided obviously he gets well. So they can support you and they can pick you up when you're down. Can you hold on to hope all by yourself? No. Can you hold on to hope when other people are around you holding on to hope for you? Yes. That's the trick. And this goes for addicts too, guys, or women, if you're female addicts. Get a support network, because sometimes recovery feels hopeless. Sometimes we want to give up. It seems like too much work and life seems too hard. Get some people around you who can hold on to hope for you when you're feeling hopeless, and you'll get to return the favor at some point down the road. So betrayed partners, addicts, we don't do very well alone. We need people in the same situation to support us and be there for us and to pick us up when we fall down. So that's how you can hold on to hope. Let others do it for you. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. I am completely talked out and we're out of time. David will be back next week. I promise, I promise, I promise. And thank you, everybody, just for being here and for hanging out. And we'll see you all next week. So have a great one.